Hello there, I am Martin Ramsey and welcome to Heart in Hand, the Rangers podcast. Normally on a Monday and International Week we wouldn't be doing a flagship show as there's not a lot of Rangers content to talk about. This week has been slightly different, as I'm sure many of you are aware. So with my guest tonight, and very much in inverted commas, David Edgar, we're here to just recap and reflect on what's been a challenging and very interesting few days in the world of Heart in Hand and Rangers. Good evening, David. How are you?
I'm okay, Martin. A little tired. It's been quite a fraught few days, I think it's fair to say, and involved going to a lot of places I didn't envisage myself going again in my life. But we are where we are, and there's been an awful lot of positive things that have happened for us, a few negative things as well, but you've got to deal with what life throws at you, I suppose.
Okay, if anyone's just coming from Mars or the Outer Hebrides or just one of those kind of off the grid kind of holidays where everything's switched off and they haven't been completely on the ball with everything that's happened since Thursday night. Recap for us where we've been and kind of where we are.
Yeah. On Thursday afternoon, I was contacted by a journalist from the Daily Record called Mark McGivern. Some of you may know Mark McGivern. He has a track record in muckraking stories. That's kind of what he does. Very tabloid journalist, which, fair enough. If that's what you grew up wanting to be, that's your decision. Anyway, he got in touch with me to say that a whistleblower had been in touch with him. I think he thinks we're big tobacco rather than a small football podcast, but to suggest that they'd found several historic hate tweets from myself, from Cammy Bell, one of our podders, and Ian Hogg, another one of our podders. And he listed them and said that the police had been informed. Did I have any comment to make on it? So I had a look at the tweets, and first of all, I just want to say this right at the start. They'd managed to find in 12 years 83,000 tweets of mine too. I've not been deleting tweets over the weekend, folks, which should tell you something. The reason for that is the two of mine that they found are not offensive. They're not legally actionable. They're nothing. It was done purely so they could link me into it. And secondly, clearly because they'd gone after me and hadn't found anything, they then decided they would go after two of my friends, which I think is pretty scummy and cowardly. If they wanted to go at me, they should have had it. And he said the story would run. So I issued a statement to him after discussions. Cammy and Ian's tweets were bad, and I wouldn't deny that for a second. They contained language that shouldn't be used. Both of them accepted this. Now, of course, there's context, but it doesn't matter. The world is as it is. We get it. Both of them accepted this. Both of them have stood down from the podcast, and both of them have apologised unreservedly, and will then actually in the future go and do Rangers diversity course as part of the Everyone Anyone campaign. Held their hands up to it straight away. Didn't try to hide from it. They took responsibility for it, which I think is all you can do in those circumstances. And now look forward for a chance to improve as they move forward. I put that in the statement to Daily Record, but I did call out what I saw as a fairly obvious attack on both Rangers supporters and Rangers FC. When the story ran in the Daily Record on Friday morning, it was front page news, and they had dedicated 3 pages to it, which I'm not necessarily sure was the most important thing that was happening in the world right now. But okay, clearly what they wanted to do was splash our faces on it because it's public shaming. They want to cause trouble for you. They want it to impact on your life. I then, had a read at the article, which contained several falsehoods, as you might imagine, contained several other things which Ipso have been contacted about. But what then happened was something absolutely remarkable. That thousands, and I do mean thousands, I've had over 30,000 messages of support and offers of help since then, started flooding into Heart in Hand. But along with that came hundreds, and again, not exaggerating, hundreds of offensive tweets from Daily Record journalists over the years. I compiled all these together. I then did exactly what Mark McGivern had done. I sent them all to the Daily Record asking for comment. I sent them to Reach PLC asking for comment, and I sent them to the police, as did hundreds of other Rangers fans. Various Daily Record journalists, at the last count, I believe we're up to 15, have had to lock or delete their accounts. And the Daily Record issued a statement on Sunday night saying that they are investigating historic hate tweets at the Daily Record. The Daily Record are not interested in me. They don't particularly like me. They never have, but they're not interested in me, and they're certainly not interested in Cammy Neen. What they're upset about is that Rangers have a new media policy, which is that you can pay to be an official media partner of the club. Now, the Daily Record can't. They wouldn't get into Ibrox regardless. They could offer 3 times the money and it wouldn't make a difference. But the aim of this was that what they thought would happen would be that we would, hide our faces in shame. Rangers would be forced to cancel the official media partnership, and that they could then use that as a stick to beat Rangers with to get back into covering Rangers games. And none of that happened. What instead happened is the Daily Record, and it's gone worldwide now. I've been contacted by journalists from out with the UK and plenty from the London media wanting to discuss what is now a scandal, an endemic, systemic culture of hate tweets at the Daily Record. There is a slight difference here. Firstly, I am a sole employee, Martin, as you know. I own Heart and Hand. It's my business. All of you guys, there's around about 60 voluntary contributors. You don't have employment contracts. And with the best will in the world, I can't monitor everyone's social media content. I just don't have the time. I'm sorry. And I certainly can't go back 14 years and look at everybody's tweets over that period. What we ensure or try to ensure is that we make sure our content it's acceptable standards. And when it doesn't, because we're grown-ups, what we expect is that someone will get in touch with us, and if we've offended somebody accidentally, because we don't go out our way to do it, then we'll deal with it. But that was not the aim of this. The aim of this was to try and, as I say, get back into Ibrox by knocking someone out of the way to do it. It hasn't worked out for the Daily Record at all. And now they are facing the exact same situation they wanted to place us in, because the Daily Record said that any organisation who had any employees, although we didn't, but any employees who were facing investigation for hate tweets should have their press passes revoked. So by that, I am assuming the Daily Record are not intending to cover any forthcoming football matches until the results of their investigation have been revealed and the police investigation into their journalists have been revealed. So I'm taking it from that we can expect not to see the Daily Record at the Scotland game or at any of the matches at the weekend.
I doubt that. I doubt that very much. But it is the distinction, isn't it? Because this article wasn't Rangers podcasting and Twitter shame. Although it certainly wasn't solely about that. It was an argument, and it was made very clear and plain within the text that Heart should not be, or should no longer be, an official media partner of Rangers because of these historic tweets. If you're taking that position, which is a kind of moral or professional ethics position, then you kind of need to have your house in order, and it would maybe indicate a lack of communication within the newspaper around how that article was going to be presented, and it's caused quite the stir over the weekend, David. We'll get into the nature of all of this in a minute, but you did mention that the real point, it wasn't about a Rangers podcast and their Twitter. It was about this Rangers media policy, and even within the text of the articles, the Rangers brought in Heart and Hand podcast as official media partners to replace the mainstream media outlets this season. Meaning that, press conferences with Steven Gerrard are conducted by fans instead of journalists. We weren't brought in at all, as far as I'm aware. You've paid up and as you've mentioned, plenty of the other media outlets, the more mainstream media outlets, have had the opportunity to do so as well. This was not something brought in on a nice deal at the expense of the traditional media. And I found that sentence quite revealing about the tone and purpose of the whole thing, because it's wrong.
Yeah, it is wrong. Everyone in the media in Scotland, fan media as well, were offered this same opportunity. We chose to take it. What other businesses do or don't do is no concern of mine. It's not up to me whether they want to do this or whether they don't, and they'll have their own reasons. But for us, it was something I felt was good in terms of an opportunity, and it was something that I felt could be useful. We could afford it. Might not always be the case in the future, but at this point we were able to afford it. And also for us, it's a chance to put money back into the club. So, you know, we look to do that anyway. We've sponsored players in the past. Yeah, we've sponsored match days in the past, etc. So we've always put money into the club, and this seemed another way of doing it. But, you know, we get something back from it, don't get me wrong. And we decided to do it. So that the idea that they had to take us out was... it wouldn't have helped their case, because I don't think Daily Record understand a couple of things, Martin. Firstly, a takedown by a newspaper only works because of two reasons, and that's firstly that the people you're taking down don't have a platform to respond to you, and secondly, pressure from employers, because generally what happens in a situation like this is that your employers are contacted, and you'll either face sanction from them, or you will they'll tell you to make it go away. Even if you're in the right, even if the paper are wildly wrong, you will be told just make this go away as quickly as possible. And they know that. Where it fell down for them is that I do have a platform, and not only the platform that I have, which in some ways is actually, there'll be more people listening to this podcast than buy a Daily Record. That's something that's changed. More people will hear this than buy the Daily Record. And also, I'm my own boss. I don't have to answer to anyone. I'm reasonably financially secure. My wife retired. My parents are retired. I don't need to concern myself with that sort of thing. So I was able to punch back. And the platform I have was magnified by the thousands of Rangers fans who were incredibly offended, because they saw what this was. They knew what this was. We didn't have to go out and proselytise about this. They knew. They could see it for what it was by a rather scummy journalist, a very scummy newspaper, which is a shame, because, you know, the Daily Record was once a paper, and now it's something from Kelvin Mackenzie's, snotty hanky. And I think that they miscalculated what would happen. They think they've got power that they no longer have. Any digital journalist, and I've been told this by a digital journalist, any digital journalist could have told them what would happen, and could have just set it out stage by stage what was going to happen to them. You mentioned earlier you thought there was a lack of communication. I know, and this is from inside the Daily Record, because a lot of the staff at the Daily Record are deeply, deeply unhappy about the position they've been placed in. I know that there was an editorial meeting on Wednesday at which the general consensus was they should not run this piece because of the transparently obvious outcome. And it was nodded through by the editor, David Dick, and the journalist in question. They didn't tell other journalists or other departments, which is why they were quite so unprepared for this.
Okay. There's been, I mean, this is obviously exploded this weekend, but this tension, this conversation between fan media, mainstream media, old media, new media, I find these dichotomies a wee bit depressing. There is room for us all. It just needs to be better. But this seems like a different world we're almost in now, because this doesn't usually happen. This kind of punch back, this kind of fight back. The tension appears, the temperature appears, or it certainly feels to have dissipated somewhat, and that's good. And hopefully we can kind of move on to a kind of better path forward. But where do you see this, not this story, David, but just the general media landscape moving from now on? Because there's surely scope for just the general quality to be a lot better, regardless of who's providing it.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. We've never really tried to get in their way. We've set ourselves up as an alternative to traditional media, but I think that's just basic consumerism, isn't it? Don't spend your money there, spend it with us. But we've never gone out and attacked or tried to take down a newspaper, which would be ludicrous. We're a very small organisation of volunteers. It turns out we're bigger than I thought, and it turns out that no paper is as big as the Rangers support. That is an army you do not want up against you. And when they came together for this, my goodness, you felt the rumblings. But I've always thought they can do their thing. We might slag them off. They can slag us off, as they've been doing the last few weeks because of the media policy. And you can criticise standards. If someone comes out and says, your podcast is rubbish, well, that's fine. That's subjective. But when you actively go out your way to try and do people down to damage, it seems very 80s. It does seem very thing that you associated with kind of very lowbrow tabloids. And I just don't think there's the appetite for that anymore, Martin, for that type of story. I just don't think people want them. And I certainly don't think people want them about just ordinary people that they've never heard of in the main. Because let's face it, how many people around Scotland had heard of any of us? Very few. So I just don't think there's the attitude for that. If something better comes out of this, it's something that the press in Scotland seem content to head towards oblivion. Back in the day, they would sell, literally 20 years ago, the Daily Record sold 800,000 copies a day. And now they are under 70,000 copies a day, and it's dropping. And they seem just content that, that's just what's happening. The internet's killing papers. Rather than maybe looking at why that is, if that's the case, then why are sites like ours growing? And we've always said it's because we talk about football, whereas they talk about soap opera. It's because we talk about the actual match and what goes on, and the things that fans talk about. They talk about, as we know, transfer swoops and manager rages at, and I just don't think there's the appetite for that anymore. I've heard from a lot of print journalists over the years, people won't pay for content, and I think, no, they won't pay for yours because they're paying for mine, and they're paying for plenty of other websites that have come out over the last few years doing different things. So it's you, but they just seem, as I say, to have accepted that that's just the way it is and nothing can be done about it. I do think that if the Record have got any sense, and other papers watching this have any sense, they'll realise that people don't want to read these stories. They see them for what they are. They know they're nasty. They know they're trying to ruin people's lives. They know they're trying to get people sacked. It's a public shaming. There's a great book by John Ronson called So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And the people, there's no reason not to know what this does to people's lives. It turns families upside down, and they did it anyway. And I think the really sad thing about it is that, did they get a bump from it? No. Were they going to sell more papers in the back of this? No. And actually it'll end up costing them money, because I know for a fact that advertisers are wanting answers. And then, of course, with a scandal that's now emerged about the systemic culture of bigotry among the reporters, that it's going to have a much more negative effect anyway. But just don't do this stuff. Just report on news. Don't invent it. And that's what this was. This was somebody sitting down and saying, they started from an end point, which is, I want to take these guys down. And they went looking for a way to do that. That isn't news. That's not reporting. That is telling a story. And what they've found, though, is that it's a story that's offended people rather than impressing them.
Yeah. But the evidence was real. I mean, the tweets were real, and you've mentioned the reflection and the contrition amongst the boys for that, and clearly in the cold light of day, some of them, in fact all of them, they don't make great reading. This mining for historical controversy. It's nothing new, is it? I mean, we're not the first story to emerge. It's been a thing on social media for some time, and I mean, I find it depressing. I don't really care what people say. make it as free as possible, really, unless it's libelous or threatening to an individual. Because I tend to think that most of the kind of I'm offended stories are a wee bit manufactured for a purpose. When it's contemporaneous, when someone says something on Twitter, or it's they're on radio or something like that, and even if the outrage is kind of slightly exaggerated, or even if it's real, at least it's live. At least it's a live reaction to something that's been said, and there's an authenticity, in inverted commas, in some cases about that. But when you're searching out something to be offended by, I think by definition, then it's contrived. It's disingenuous, and therefore the whole kind of furore is meaningless.
Yeah, it's manufactured.
Yeah, and listen, just taking a step back from our situation here. Language, context, of course, is important. In fact, it's crucial, and language without that is pretty much meaningless, especially around humour. And I don't want to get into the individual tweets themselves, but a lot of them, from what I can tell, the language was used in a way to be a bit more outrageous, or it was used in an ironic way, and quite often used in conversation with someone else who understands the rules of this conversation. They understand that the terms have been used ironically, often speaking with people from the other side of this West of Scotland divide, who know exactly what's been said in what context. And Twitter's so seductive and so difficult for that. Sometimes we get involved in a conversation that we forget that there's a wider audience there, and a lot of them haven't been invited. And the show never ends unless you delete it after some thought and reflection, whether that be the next day or years later. And then that conversation takes on a whole different meaning and a whole different structure in and of itself. But we should know this by 2021, David. We should know what social media is like. And I felt quite depressed. I've had to lock my Twitter. Now, I'm a boring man, as you know. So there's not much on there. But I felt I had to, because we did, it's been a weekend of scrutiny. That's not what I believe Twitter should be for, and it should be for people that agree with me as well as disagree, and they take me or leave me. But things are kind of changing, and I don't know if they're changing for the better, and I don't know what we get out of that in terms of any kind of discourse or humour or whatever else.
No, I would agree with that. As I say, there are things that are genuinely shocking, and when you see them, then of course you have the right to complain about them. But a lot of the time, as you say, it's I don't like that group of people for whatever reason, football rivalry in this case, and therefore I want to get them. And there is something in the power of a mob when you feel that you're righteous, and I think we saw that with the Daily Record, that they were very much trying to claim a moral authority, and that is what the campaign back at them was, to show that they have no moral authority to do this, because their journalists have done exactly the same things that they were looking down their nose at and trying to get action taken against other people for. It's a pantomime, as is a lot of the things in Scotland. As we've spoken before about how the demand for sectarianism in Scotland outstrips the supply of it, so they have to invent it, such as videos that have been doctored, etc. They have to try and make 6 people being arrested out of a crowd of 50,000 as somehow a terrible societal blight. It's depressing, but people make money from it. People have careers built on it, and it will continue. I don't really see how it will stop. You can have these tweets and apologise for them and realise what you did wrong and become a better person, which is surely the aim, to see what you did wrong and learn why it's wrong. Or the other person can go, haha, gotcha. That's not somebody who's interested in social justice, Martin. That's not somebody who's interested in improving society. It's someone who doesn't like another person or another set of people, and they are trying to hurt them and trying to do them down, and that's what's happened. What we highlighted with the Daily Record was their hypocrisy, but I think we made a wider point, which is this stuff happens. Why are we pretending that things like this, that ordinary, everyday people do say to each other in the context of conversation, is somehow this great sin? People are human. People tell sick jokes. They laugh at sick jokes. They always have. Laughably, one of the things that they tried, as I say, and failed to get me on, it was literally a joke I stole from Mock the Week.
Yeah.
So, that's the ludicrous situation of a very popular show, that's been running for years. And that's the problem. It's people, when it suits them, put on this mask of authority, this I am better than you exceptionalism, which there's too much of in Scotland at the moment, and it comes from the government down. Too many people base themselves on what they're not, and they base themselves on being better than. And it's fine in certain contexts. It's fine to say my football team's better than yours. Absolutely. So point of football. Who finishes higher? Right, I get that. But when you're saying you're better than a group of people, or when you're saying that you're better than a protected category, or you're saying that you're better than the English, then that's when I think we start to get into problems, because that then convinces people that they're better in all ways, which means they're morally better. And if it means that you're a morally good person, it means the others, by definition, must be bad people, or at least not on your level of good. And it gives a justification to people for their own hate. We are not forcing people to look at their own bigotry. We're encouraging them to project it onto others and demand they're punished for it. And that's a tragic situation that we find ourselves in.
It is, and it just leads more, to more of this you mate kind of Twitter, which again, if one is taking a moral position, which was taken on Thursday night, Friday morning, then that has a validity. It has to stop though. You can't keep going back over everybody's output. And most of us, I imagine, were a different person 8 years ago than they are now. So if they've made an off-colour joke that they thought was funny then, or were trying to get likes, let's be honest, they were trying to keep raising the game, keep raising the stakes, and turning up the kind of outrageous. It's funny you mentioned Mock the Week. I know the tweet that you mean, and I know the joke that you mean. But stand-up comedy's changed so much in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, you're talking about Frankie Boyle, Jimmy Carr, Ricky Gervais pushing those boundaries. Now, I think Frankie Boyle's kind of going complete 180. Jimmy Carr's changed the thing. I don't know if Ricky has, but he already did his in a wee bit more intelligent way. But I guess it comes back down to this thing. Whenever you see something that is considered offensive or is controversial, personally, my question would always be, is this genuine? Is this a genuine expression of oneself? Now, those comedians we're talking about there who covered AIDS and rape and disability and all sorts, do you seriously think, as a grown-up, that they found those subjects in and of themselves pleasant and funny? Or, I mean, Jimmy Carr used to say the best reaction he ever got in an audience was someone laughing and then going, "Oh, so we can't have it both ways." Your initial response was to laugh at that, but it was wordplay, black comedy and quite dark, but wordplay to play with people's temperance and their levels. It's superficial. Jokes are mostly. Sometimes they can be deliberate, and that's the grey area, isn't it? And we've seen on Twitter this year the Black English players at the World Cup, Glenn Kamara Roof, where you see tweets and messages that you would have to consider probably are, in the case of Slavia Prague fans, definitely are an expression of themselves. They mean it. There'll be some trolls in there, no question, who just enjoy the mayhem. But this is what we're trying to navigate And when things become so black and white and so out of context, it makes that harder to navigate. It makes people feel less free to just play around with language and play around with humour or play devil's advocate or whatever. And I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think it's grown up. I think it comes from a good place. The kind of Mary Whitehouse. It's not about sex, drugs, and rock and roll anymore. It's obviously about it's based on the Equality Act, I guess now. And of course, that comes from a good place, but I think it's counterproductive, and I think it ever deals with the real problems in society. If you're told either to shut up, don't say that word, and it kind of worked for a while, didn't it? Political correctness had it created a kind of society that was very much like a kind of middle class dinner party where people didn't say certain words. But it can only happen for so long, and I think it's been a bit of a veneer. I think it's quite superficial, and we've seen, I think, in the uptick in populism, both here and the United States, that it's not really solved anything, because those ignorances, those biases, those opinions still kind of exist. They've just been shushed for a while. And I don't think we get to a kind of grown-up place where we can treat the nuance of language properly and really get to the heart of genuine ignorance, genuine hate, genuine division. When we blow up language, so we then blow up the division, don't we?
Absolutely, and that's I really hate when I get people coming on to me and taking a context of what I've said, placing it in their own context and telling me why I'm wrong or offensive because of it. And that's happening far too often as well. I'm disabled, as you know, but I don't make a big thing of it. But I'm registered disabled. And therefore, there will be disability jokes that I find too much. There will be other ones that I'm okay with, but that's subjective. That's me as a person. I think, though, the idea that any joke about disability should be banned, I'm uncomfortable with. And I say that as somebody who is disabled. I think that the other thing that kind of concerns me as we go through all of this, and it's, as you say, it seems to be getting worse, is it's affecting ordinary people in huge ways. It happened to me years ago when I was at the Rangers Supporters Trust. I was a spokesman. Celtic fans complained about something that I'd said, and I got fired from my job. Basically, the workplace were like, it's too much hassle, right? We know you probably didn't do any. We think you're a decent person, but honestly, it's just take some money and go. And it turns your life upside down. It's genuine. I mean, it sent me into a massive spiral that ended up with me, jobless, homeless, and in rehab, divorced. So, do people really want that? I don't want to do that to a Celtic fan just because he said something stupid on Twitter. I don't want that to, I might think the guy's a Berk, or a suitably other term. I hope I've not, Daily Record will probably run that as a headline. I've said that, but I'm allowed to think that without necessarily wanting the guy's life turned upside down. I think if there's, non-stop stream of it, invective getting worse and worse and worse, then yeah, that is a person who has problems. But again, by turning his life upside down and making his situation desperate, are we improving society there? Or, is he going to become a better person through that? Or is he going to become bitter and resentful? I was very fortunate. The reason I didn't become bitter and resentful is that I went to AA. And AA saved my life, and it teaches you to think a different way. And one of the other things it teaches you very much so is forgiveness. And I do try to do that. And I know that might sound ironic when I'm sitting here, after going full speed ahead for the Daily Record, but it doesn't tell you to be a victim either. You don't need to sit there and just let somebody rain punches on you without firing back. But we are taking ourselves into a very, very dangerous place. And when it's being encouraged and magnified by people in positions of authority in Scotland, which is happening all the time, then it does become very dangerous and people are going to get hurt. And the problem is we're seeing here with this whole situation is nobody wins. Everybody just loses to a certain degree. And whoever has I said a thing on Twitter that I'm the type of person that when I'm in a fight, I'll just burn everything down so that I'm on top of the ashes. That's not a healthy attitude. That's not the person I want to be. I understand that. It's who I am, but it's an urge I try to fight and try to deal and be better with and try to be constructive. But if people aren't going to let you, and people are going to tell you that you are the base side of your personality, because we've all got a bit of it in us, right? We do. Everyone. Nobody's perfect. Then I think you're just going to magnify that. You're going to make it worse. And you're creating a situation where everything becomes ultra, ultra tribal. And everything just ends up with more pain, more suffering, more damage. To get back to what we're talking about here, the reason that the Daily Record deserves everything that's coming to it is it knew this and it did it anyway. And it did it from a very cynical reason to try and do something that would be commercial or commercially benefit to it. It felt, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think a primary 3 kid could have told you that it wasn't going to be beneficial, but still. And that's why I've got a real problem with it. And that's why I want them to come out and accept that the standards they want to hold other people to are unreal, that they don't take into account people's humanity, and that they've stopped treating people like human beings and they've started treating them like automatons that should be programmed in a certain way to say certain things at certain times. And if you deviate from that, then there will be consequences. You will be punished for that. That's not the kind of society I want to live in. And when one of Scotland's most venerable old institutions is doing that, then yeah, I'm going to stand up and say, no, I'm not taking this. And the most heartening thing, Martin, is literally tens of thousands of Rangers fans have stood with me and Heart and Hand and you and all the other guys and said, no, we're not prepared to take that either. As have fans of other clubs, incidentally.
Yeah.
Ordinary, decent people know what this is. And I'm not naive enough to think anything I do can change the culture in Scotland, but nor am I silly enough to think that thousands and thousands of people in Scotland aren't powerful enough to change something. They are. I'm not. They are. And if any good does come of this, it's maybe we'll all be a wee bit kinder, nicer, and more understanding, and not always seek to jump straight to punishment for people. But with all of that said, and I'm about to get my guitar out and play Kumbaya. With all of that said, then I do maintain that if anybody continues to come after me, my friends, people I care about, then I'm going to defend them. And we know that there is an agenda against Rangers in this country. We've seen it. We've seen it before. That's why the media situation is how it is with Rangers. Then I am going to stand with all the other Rangers supporters and say, no, we no longer take this. We do not accept this. At Heartland, we didn't ask for this, but we're fighting back, and we're fighting by their rules. This is the game they invited us to play. And now they're upset that we're playing it. Nah, not having it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, Rangers in this podcast obviously are principal interest and priority, but certainly from my point of view, just creating a better media landscape would be the real win for everybody involved, and just doing things a lot smarter. With a wee bit more depth and a wee bit more nuance. This has been the most introspective and philosophical flagship I think we've probably ever done, David. Just a couple of questions before we wrap up. And it isn't that reflection for all of us on this podcast, but there are many others, not just within the Rangers community, Celtic community, and other clubs as well, who may be reflecting on how they conduct themselves on air, how they conduct themselves on social media. And again, the boys, although there is some contextual distortion that's been played up and magnified and had a lot of fun with deliberately, they understand their responsibility in it and the reality that they're in and how they've contributed to that. But you mentioned earlier with your two tweets that were raised that you said they were both not actionable and not offensive. Well, one's true. They're not actionable. That's a matter of legal fact. But you don't get to decide what's offensive, neither do I. That's what creates the whole kind of mix. How do us as a group reflect and go forward in terms of how we kind of do what we enjoy doing? Like, this is a hobby for most of us. I'm a huge Rangers fan. I'm a much bigger fan of paying my mortgage. But I talk about old Rangers games and the Premier League and the current situation, and I love doing it. Don't really fancy being bullied out of giving up something I love. But clearly, we all have to reflect on, just how we behave.
If I've done something that offends anyone, tell me about it and explain to me what it is that's offended you. And I might reject it. I might say, I'm sorry, I can't agree with you there. I reject the premise, and we'll just have to agree to disagree and maybe not have anything to do with each other. But there is also a chance that you'll say to me, David, I'm offended by this and this is why. And I'll say, and I'll realise that, and I'll learn something from you. That, I think, seems to me to be a healthier way to go. I'm quite prepared for someone to come to me and say, you said this, and I did, here's why it offended me. And it's happened to me, by the way. It's happened to me after live shows we've done. Yep. And someone's come up to me and they've said, look, I didn't like that. And you get defensive naturally, we're humans. And you go, well, why? And then I've kind of maybe walked away and went, he's right. He is right. I'm wrong. And then I don't use it. And again, I would argue that if you've got to go back 12 years to find certain words, that's a behaviour that no longer exists. It's past.
Well, there's one word in particular, and I'm not going to repeat it because, a mortgage, but it starts with the same two words as mortgage. That was used an awful lot in common parlance at the start of the last decade, just to mean idiot. Ricky Gervais got into a bit of bother. I think, if memory serves, October 2012 maybe. And there was a big furore about the use of it. And then it just kind of disappeared from that kind of common, or such common usage on social media and forums and daily life, because things change and people change. And the idea of this gotcha, here's something from 2012. On what?
Yeah,
it doesn't need to be
nothing.
It doesn't need to be a teenager, and we've seen a lot of that. And I've got limited sympathy again because of the position the Record took. But you get journalists there who were almost kids when some of these things were dragged out. But you don't need to have been a child. You can get to 40 as I am, and I might still change opinions by the time I'm 50. I certainly hope I might, because you grow and you develop and you alter as the world alters. But it's just this boneheaded. Well, it's not boneheaded actually. If it was just boneheaded ignorance, then you can maybe have some sympathy. But it's a deliberate contextual distortion that I don't think helps any of us. But it's been a difficult few days. One final question, and this might be a wee bit self-indulgent, David, but you've not been the best of health of late. The doctor told you to avoid stress. And I've pretty much had to check on you about 9 o'clock every night to make sure you're putting Twitter away. We get sucked into this, don't we? There's an energy that comes from it. I understand that. But we all just need to calm down a wee bit, don't we?
Oh, absolutely we do. Look, I didn't want any of this. And I'll keep saying that because it's true. I really didn't. As you mentioned there, it really isn't good for my health. But again, if I'd rather go out fighting than go out on my knees. That's not who I am. But like I say, I think that once the dust settles and we see how the landscape is, then we'll know what to do. They're not going to stop us doing what we love. They're not going to stop us following the team that we love. And there are people out there who want to take away. They want to make it difficult for a Rangers fan to do the kind of thing we do. They want you to think it'll be too much hassle because then it will remove voices that they don't want to hear from the airwaves. Unfortunately for them, I've got quite a strong back. Metaphorically, literally, it's absolute paper and string and chewing gum, but literally isn't what matters here. We'll keep doing what we keep doing. I'll keep doing what I keep doing, and the supporters will keep doing what they keep doing. I've never been prouder to be a member of the Rangers family. What happened over the weekend absolutely took my breath away. I didn't expect it. I've never seen anybody, credit to Mark McGivern, I've never seen anybody unite the Rangers support like this since Philip Helander the week before. But a lot of this came about, and we know that because Celtic can't defend a goal kick, corner kick. But they've forced us closer together, and that gives me the energy, and it gives me the strength and the belief to just keep going, because what we do matters. We don't take ourselves seriously at Heartland, but we get people telling us what we do matters. Nobody does that for the Daily Record. Nobody says to the Daily Record, you help me through some tough times, because they're not interested in doing that. They do for us. They've got customers. We've got a community. And as far as I'm concerned, one Heart and Hand listener is worth 100 Daily Record readers.
David, thanks for that. I know it's been a tough week. We'll be back on Thursday, I think, with Heart and Hand Extra to preview some actual football.
I cannot wait, and very much looking forward to it.
Thank you, David. Thank you, listeners. And tune in on Thursday. I'll be back at some point, I'm sure. Until then, bye for now.